Picture a centre-back standing on the edge of the box, heartbeat drumming in his ears. He checks over his shoulder once, twice, and he still can't see him. Then, like a freight train slipping out of a tunnel, a blonde blur appears between bodies, takes one giant stride, and the net ripples before anyone understands what just happened. That's not luck. That's calculation. That's repetition. That's inevitability. And that's the terrifying truth about Erling Haaland. He turns the most difficult act in football into muscle memory. If you love football stories told with no fluff and all the details that matter, make sure you subscribe to Infinite Football right now. It helps the channel more than you think, and it means you'll never miss our deep dives into the game's most fascinating players and ideas. Tonight, we're telling the full story of Erling Haaland, how a kid who once had to survive on skill alone became the most efficient scoring machine of his generation, and why, even now, so many people still get him wrong. Let's start with a simple truth. Goal scoring is the currency of football. Most forwards will spend an entire career trying to find a reliable way to turn a half chance into something more. Haaland doesn't just do it, he industrializes it. He takes the chaos inside the box and flattens it into a straight line between his run and the goal. And yet, for a player who keeps smashing records, the conversation around him is weirdly skeptical. People don't say he scores too many to be real. They say he doesn't touch the ball enough, or he doesn't link play like others. The focus often shifts to what he's not instead of what he is. One of the most brutally effective strikers the sport has seen. To understand how we got here, we need to rewind, not to Manchester or Dortmund, but to the days when he wasn't a giant. There was a time when the kid from Norway wasn't bigger, faster, and stronger than everyone else. Back then, he was skinny. He was playing against older boys, getting nudged off the ball, learning how to survive without being able to out-muscle anyone. So he leaned on technique, on how to receive, how to feint, how to slip away at just the right second. Those habits didn't vanish when he grew. They became the hidden scaffolding beneath the powerhouse you see today. The early scouts saw the promise and the problems. The promise? A ruthless nose for goal, a radar locked on the back post, a boredom with anything that didn't lead to a shot. The problems? Coordination still catching up to his body, raw touch in tight spaces, the need to stitch attacks together more consistently. That critique stayed with him. It follows him now, even as he bends goal charts out of shape. From those youth pitches he climbed to Mulder, where the numbers started to look ridiculous. Goals in bunches, explosions of production that didn't seem sustainable. And then they were. People said, he needs a bigger stage. He found one, Red Bull Salzburg, a perfect laboratory, a vertical team, a green light to sprint into space, a test tube for a striker who eats through balls for breakfast. The world saw the headlines. 9 in one game at a Youth World Cup. Hat-tricks that arrived before the other team had even finished adjusting their defensive line. He didn't just pass the audition, he broke the sound system. What changed behind the scenes? Not magic. Representatives, gym work, sleep, nutrition, sprint mechanics. There are players who fall in love with the romance of the number 9. Haaland fell in love with the schedule. When he grew, the coordination caught up, with interest. The same movements that kept him alive when he was smaller, checking shoulders, pausing at the defender's blind spot, accelerating at the exact moment the crosser looks up, now came attached to a body that could hit 36 kilometers per hour and finish with either foot before a keeper can set. And then came the next exam, Borussia Dortmund. A bigger league, tighter spaces, smarter centre-backs, louder stadiums. On his debut, he came off the bench with the scoreline tilted the wrong way and turned a problem into a highlight reel in 20-something minutes. It wasn't just the goals. It was the sense that everything about him had become sharper. Dortmund asked him to do more, hold defenders off, bounce passes, occupy a back line, then spin behind anyway. The goals never slowed. If anything, the scale got heavier. This is where a story inside the story begins. Comparison. It's impossible to talk about Haaland without people turning it into a debate about other stars, against the all-round orchestration of Harry Kane, against the solo fireworks and dribbling of Kylian Mbappe. Those comparisons can be fun, but they also distort the picture. Kane's game is a violin. He can create the melody and play the final note. Mbappe can conduct his own storm. Haaland is an airstrike. You don't ask an airstrike to play a sonata, you ask it to end the war. Manchester came next. On one hand, it looked obvious. A team that creates 1 million cutbacks a season adds the world's most ruthless finisher. On the other hand, it was a unique test. Could a striker who thrives on directness adapt inside a structure that values patience, circulation, and control? Would he touch the ball enough to satisfy everyone? Would he deliver in Europe? The last missing piece for a machine that dominated domestically but kept tripping on the sharp edges of knockout football. There was a wobble in a glorified friendly. People circled. Then the season started and the wobble turned into a blur. Goals on his league debut. The first hat-trick. The second, before the first celebration had even cooled. The third, while defenders were still workshopping how to stop the first. He didn't just score, he redefined how quickly records can be erased. Think of the historical marks in the Premier League. These are supposed to be granite. He ran through them like tape at the end of a sprint. But the better he did, the stranger the conversation became. He could score 5 and people would shake their heads and say, yes, but he had 12 touches. As if touches are a currency you can spend at the trophy parade. As if wandering into midfield to complete a few safe passes would be more valuable than living in the penalty area, warping the geometry of the match and detonating at the decisive second. This is the part most critics miss. Haaland's invisibility is often intentional. A striker can be involved by not being involved. He stands high on the last line, and every second he does that, he stretches the defensive block. Midfielders look up and see space they didn't have before. Wingers beat their man because the fullback is terrified of the run behind. The cutback window opens because one defender is cheating toward the goalmouth, expecting the cross to find that enormous number, 9. If you freeze the frame on the final pass or the final shot, you can miss the gravity. But over 90 minutes, the orbit is constant. Of course, there were nights when the spotlight found him and he didn't write the last line. Champions League semi-finals, a final decided by a single strike that wasn't his. On those nights, the murmurs got loud again. Where's the all-around game? Where's the touch? Where's the drop-in, the disguise, the killer pass? As if we haven't watched eras dominated by strikers who specialized. As if the sport suddenly changed its scoring system and forgot to tell us. Let's talk about link-up play, because it's the phrase that gets tossed around like confetti. At City, his passing choices have become cleaner. His wall passes are quicker. He identifies when to step toward the ball and when to pin the centre-backs. He's not going to morph into a deep-lying playmaker, and he shouldn't. His best version isn't 50 touches of connective tissue, it's 5 touches that end a contest. But in the margins, those small improvements that add up, he has grown. The chemistry with the creators around him has thickened. The cues are clearer. When the midfielder looks up, Haaland is already on the shoulder, already reading the angle, already telling the crosser where the finish will be. This is also where the childhood version of him still whispers instructions. The skill he needed when he was smaller didn't disappear. It shows up in the timing of his runs and the economy of his first touch. Watch how rarely he needs a backlift to generate power. Watch how he shields without wrestling. Watch how he resets his feet in the split second between a bobbling ball and the shot. None of that is brute force. It's craft. There's a human core to the machine too. Confidence that isn't loud, but steel-colored. A rhythm to his training that doesn't blink because the headlines do. He doesn't chase approval, he chases repetition. That's why when defenders talk about him, what really scares them isn't his size. It's the feeling that you have to make one perfect decision every time, and he only needs you to make one imperfect decision once. Let's step inside a typical Haaland goal and slow it down. The ball begins on the left, a wide player shaping to cross. Centre-backs are aligned, hands out, organising. Haaland is still. This is the first trick, stillness as disguise. He stands in the blind spot of the far defender, chest open to the crosser, weight on his back foot. As the crosser drops his head to whip the ball, Haaland takes a single step toward the penalty spot. Not to meet the ball, but to make the near centre-back take half a step with him. That half step opens a lane across the face. Then the burst. 2 long strides, a toe into the corridor between keeper and backline. 1 contact with the instep. The net moves. He jogs away like he's putting another file in the cabinet. The risk-reward of that movement is why he keeps getting to those balls. He's not improvising. He's following a personal playbook, refined in Austria, sharpened in Germany, and weaponized in England. The defender knows the pattern. The defender still can't beat it because the timing belongs to Haaland, not to the defender's whistle. Now, about the idea that he needs service. Every striker needs service. Even the magicians who dribble past 5 players start with someone rolling them the ball. What makes Haaland different is that he reduces the number of passes you need to connect to create a chance. 1 ball into space from deep can become a shooting opportunity because he's already calibrated his run to the angle of the passer's hips. A hopeful cross becomes an expected goal because his leap and reach change what "too high" means. Yes, he thrives in teams that can find him early and often, but that isn't a weakness, that's a design feature. You build around weapons that end attacks by scoring. Think of how City's structure looks when he plays. The backline and midfield move the ball with their usual composure, but the entire shape has a fast forward button now. If the press is beaten and an opponent's line is crooked, the vertical ball is on, and when it's on, it must be played. Having that option isn't a betrayal of possession football. It's what makes that possession terrifying. You can't step high with impunity because the punishment is instant and terminal. So why the underappreciation? Part of it is aesthetic. Kane will drop into the pocket and send a pass that makes you exhale. Mbappe will fly past a defender and bend a finish that looks like a painting. Haaland's beauty is harsher. It's in the speed of the execution, in the force of contact, in the absence of hesitation. People can mistake simplicity for simplicity, but this kind of simplicity is complex. The equation is solved before the ball arrives. Another part is expectation. When a player hits the ceiling quickly, we start calling the ceiling normal. 30 league goals? Normal. Golden boots? Normal. A quiet night against an elite defense? Catastrophe. The scale gets warped. For most strikers, 20 goals is a year you tell your grandchildren about. For Haaland, it's a shrug. There's also the international question. We measure greatness by what we see in summers. The biggest stages create the biggest myths. If a player's national team doesn't live deep in those tournaments, the myth-building suffers. It's not fair. It's how memory works. The funny thing is that club football is a much larger sample size. Over those months, those weeks, those minutes, Haaland is relentlessly himself. If you want to know how managers view him, watch what they change when they face him. Lines sit deeper, fullbacks tuck in, midfielders track runners instead of doubling the ball. Opponents spend more time talking than playing. That's respect measured in meters. That's fear measured in where you stand. And yet, because football is a story factory, we crave the one iconic snapshot, the last-minute winner to decide a title, the goal that turns a final into a legend. Sergio Aguero has his moment burned into our collective memory. The fair question is whether Haaland will have his. Timing is everything. A career isn't one photo, but sometimes in one photo a career becomes immortal. If you're asking whether he's capable of that moment, you already know the answer. He's been rehearsing the ending his whole life. Until then, the work continues. The touches will never be as many as the midfielders. They shouldn't be. The link-up will keep getting cleaner, not because he has to be something else, but because every season adds small tools to the same big idea. The gravity will remain, even on nights when the goal doesn't. And the goals, those will keep arriving like trains you can set your watch by. Let's zoom back out and place him in the lineage. Football splits its great forwards into a few families: creators who happen to score, scorers who can create, and scorers who turn creation into a statistical certainty. Haaland lives in that last neighborhood. He's the neighbor who waters the lawn at 6 a.m., files his taxes early, and then casually sets a new neighborhood record for the 100-meter dash on a Sunday. It's not that he can't do other things, it's that he excels at the most valuable thing. The game's scoreboard doesn't pay bonuses for embroidery. There's a lesson here for young strikers. Watch how he checks over both shoulders before every attack. Watch how he never runs at the same speed for more than 2 seconds. He's always toggling between gears, making sure the defender can't lock onto a single rhythm. Watch his first step after a teammate shoots. He's already moving for the rebound before the keeper's gloves make contact. Those aren't gifts, those are habits. Habits are teachable. That should be the most inspiring part of his story. A lot of what makes him inevitable is unglamorous and repeatable. And there's a lesson for the rest of us about judging players. When someone is this good at one thing, we like to pretend that the one thing is somehow less. It's a reflex against dominance. But football is a sport with one ultimate problem to solve: how to turn a chance into a goal. Haaland solves that problem faster than almost anyone you've watched. It's okay to say it plainly. It's okay to celebrate it without immediately reaching for a but. Across Norway, Austria, Germany, and England, the common thread is that nets have not felt safe in his presence. Different teams, different leagues, different tactical demands. Same conclusion. There is an inevitability to his game that makes defenders live with a constant headache. You can't outjump wingspan. You can't outrun timing. You can't outsmart a decision that was made before you knew there was a question. So, the next time you hear the conversation circle back to touches or aesthetics or what he isn't, remember what the scoreboard counts. Remember the defenders checking over their shoulders. Remember the stillness before the sprint. The one-step pause that opens a lane, the finish that feels like a period at the end of a sentence the rest of us were still writing. You don't have to love the music to admit the speakers are shaking. This is a generational striker, one built in quiet, refined in repetition, unleashed in systems that understand his value. He doesn't need to be everything. He needs to be inevitable. And for the next decade, a lot of matches will bend around that inevitability. If you enjoyed this deep dive and you want more football stories told like this, no recycled press conference cliches, just the full picture, tap subscribe to Infinite Football. It's the best way to support the channel and make sure these videos find you the moment they drop. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.